going on? Miguel Lloyd. And so it's always great when we got opportunities to connect with some of the bomb creators that's out here in the market. So this is my brother, Booker T. Mattison. Booker T and I, man, this brother is a dope cat. He's been in the business for a while. He's a writer. He's a director. And he also a professor, and he also happens to be a fellow Spartan. Behold the green and gold.
Behold.
Behold the green and gold. And so, man, we connected, through our networks a couple of years back, and you got here to Atlanta, and we got to connect. But man, welcome to the show, first of all.
Thank you. I'm excited to be here. I'm really honored that you are having me on. I look forward to a robust Spartan-esque chat.
There we go. There we go. We got to get these. People don't understand. I laugh and joke about it, but I love my family Rattlers. But we got some Spartans out here in the media space and content creation space, and we getting it done too. We just got to get a little bit of opportunity to get the word out. But tell us about your career, man, and kind of talk to us about how you got into this space where you are now as a writer director.
It's a great question, and I'll begin by saying I started my academic or higher education journey at Tidewater Community College in Virginia Beach, and it wasn't some grand vision I had of, hey, let's create content and win Oscars and Emmys. It was more that at that time you had to choose a major before you could register. So I'm flipping through the bulletin trying to find the discipline with the least amount of math, because math had always been my nemesis. So I chose radio television production. And as fate or God would have it, a year later, the state decided to stop funding that program at Tidewater Community College. So I transferred to Norfolk State, and it was mass communications at Norfolk State, and it was a 4-year degree. So that's how I wound up at Norfolk State. And then, let me go back to TCC really quickly. So
what year was this? What year was this?
In 90, was it 90? 1990.
Okay.
I believe this was either 90 or 91. I'm drawing a blank here. I was, but there was a professor there, Alan Campbell, who at TCC, who inspired me because he was so enthusiastic about the discipline. So the interest in radio television production did develop at TCC as a result of the enthusiasm that this professor had. He's a doctor now, Dr. Alan Campbell. So the program, is not going to be funded. I'm at Norfolk State. Norfolk State is where I learned to become a leader, joining various organizations. And also where I learned how to communicate visually. We weren't doing narrative, we were doing electronic news gathering, but we were still framing, composition, lighting, sound, editing. Those are all competencies that we learned as mass communications majors. And so I did I had the Virginia Association of Broadcasters internship at WVEC, and I believe it was my junior year at Norfolk State. So as a mass comm major, that's a big deal.
Right.
Not only do you get paid, but everything you do at the station, a lot of it makes air. So it's not just doing busy work.
That's right.
But here's what I discovered though, at that internship, is that, rather than covering other people's stories, I wanted to tell my own. And then at that point, film school became a thing. I didn't even really know there was a thing, film school at that time. So I applied to NYU Film School and was fortunate enough to get in. And once I got to NYU, I started making films. They were short films, but the way the program was structured, unlike an undergraduate program where you're taking general education courses and electives, it was all filmmaking. So that's where my filmmaking journey began. But I'd like to say, talking about Norfolk State, that I was prepared to compete and to excel at this elite film school precisely because of the training that I got as a mass communications major.
Absolutely. I'm a proud graduate of the same program. We probably missed each other about a couple of years. I started at Norfolk State in '95.
Okay. So that's when I graduated. So when I finished, you were starting.
I was starting. Yeah. So I actually started. It's so funny you say about math, because I started off.
You too?
Brother, we creatives, and it's funny. I just had an exercise with two of my daughters last night, where I was doing some quick my 9-year-old, who's a brilliant young lady, and so I helped her with some math, and it was some quick math that I did with her really quickly, and she was just like, "How'd you do that so fast?" And I told her how I did it, but then she and my 22-year-old started getting into the calculus and all that type of stuff. I said, no, I'm a creative. and it's the way our minds work, brother. It's like when you start getting too much into, it's just the way our minds work. So anyway, I started off Morgan State University in
Oh, wow, you started
1990.
in Morgan. I didn't know that.
I started at Morgan in 1990, and
Mhm.
I'll never forget the story was I wanted to be a fashion merchandising major.
Oh, wow.
And I asked it when we first get there. I'm this fresh kid out of Phoebus High School, Hampton, Virginia. I walk in there and I said, "Hey, I'm looking for the fashion merchandising department." And there's
That's why you wind up being a Kappa, ain't it? That's why you wind up being a Kappa, ain't it? Fashion.
you know what's so funny? Part of I wanted to be in a Kappa was because there's a brother out there now. Anybody can find him, Joe Claire, who's a comedian out of
Oh, yeah, Joe
DC.
Claire, of course. Yeah.
Joe Claire is a Kappa,
Mhm.
and Joe Claire was my RA at Morgan.
Oh, wow. Get out
I
of
thought
here.
Joe was the coolest cat on campus. That's a whole nother story. But when I was at Morgan and I wanted to be a fashion merchandising major, they laughed at me. They said there is no fashion merchandising major at Morgan State.
Oh.
So
Oh.
they sent me to the marketing department. I got to the marketing department and I ran into accounting once a week for 3 hours on a Wednesday night, and that was not good for me. And, and so I ended up coming home after a year and a half. Went back to where I did the community college route as well. I went to Thomas Nelson Community College for about a year and a half, and
Yeah.
then I transferred to Norfolk State in '95 and finished in '98. And so no, but when you talk about Norfolk State and that mass comm program, man, I sing the praises of that program all the time. And there's some amazing people that are doing everything from directing to videography to writing, directing. It's so interesting. I don't know if you know Melina Lawrence or not.
I do. Yeah.
And so Melina, about a month ago, had a friend of mine who was in the business. He invited me. Said, "Hey man, let's go check out this influencer house in wherever it was, Marietta, wherever it was in the city." And it was on a Saturday. We just done some stuff for the 100, and he was like, "Man, let's go check out this influencer house." And I was just like, okay, I'm tired, but let's go.
Right.
Man, I pull up this influencer house, man. Guess who's helping run this dog on influencer house? Melina Lawrence.
So Melina's there doing it.
And I'm thinking Melina's in LA.
Right.
I roll up and she's running the show and all this stuff. And of course, anybody knows Melina knows she's unmistakable when you see her. She's, this bubbly, high energy sister with these light green eyes. And you're just like, that's Melina. And so, but I'm so proud of Norfolk State and what they're doing. And so when I heard about the work that you've been doing recently, and I said, man, we got to have you guys on the show. You've got a new Christmas movie coming out that is out. It's streaming now. Tell us about this project.
Sure. It's The Sound of Christmas. It's an adaptation of Tiffany L. Warren's novel, The Replacement Wife. It stars Neo, Soraya, Drea Michelle. So it's streaming. It's a BET Plus original movie. So it's currently streaming on BET Plus. And if you don't have the BET Plus app, you can actually get a 7-day free trial at BET.plus to check the film out. It'll be premiering on the BET television channel on, that's a Friday, December 9th at 9 p.m. So if you have the BET network on your cable or satellite provider, check that out. It's the story of an out-of-work music teacher who has to navigate her budding emotions when she takes a job nannying for the two kids of a widowed, handsome billionaire. And if that storyline sounds familiar, The Sound of Music, for those of you who are into that classic musical, we essentially did an updated version of that set in Atlanta with an African American cast.
Let's check out the trailer real quick, and we'll come back and talk about it on the back end.
6 weeks ago, I was laid off from my job, and I'm going to stop living with my boyfriend. But there are so many things that would have to take place for that miracle to happen.
Sweetie, can I talk to you for a moment? I'm hiring for a position in my home. I need someone to help my 2 grandchildren. Have you ever been a nanny?
So, a single father trying to raise 2 kids all by himself.
What's it anyway like?
He does have this high-city girlfriend, Chloe.
This is my
future wife. Well, why doesn't she spend time with the kids?
She touched me with her gold digger hands.
Do, re, mi.
My late daughter-in-law, she swore by the acoustics in this room. Quentin would play the piano and she would sing.
Nobody touches that piano.
No one sings in this house anymore.
There's so much love inside of you. But you've been withholding it.
You were with her all day?
She's here to get close to the kids.
And you're falling for it.
Life isn't fair. And no matter what you do, bad stuff is still gonna happen.
Sometimes you just have to know that God is gonna make everything okay.
I was so locked into the pain of the past that I couldn't see the future.
You think you're just gonna waltz in here with your singing and Quentin's just gonna fall for you?
Montana.
All right, man, it's that time of the year again, man. It's that man. That looks like it's going to be an amazing movie. So tell us your role with this film.
So I wrote the screenplay and I directed the film. And you know, for those who may be confused, well, what's the difference? You have a book, you have a movie.
Mm-hmm.
So you have a 300 something page book that you have to turn into a 90-minute movie.
Mm-hmm.
They're two different art forms, so you can't just say, hey, put the book on the screen. So you know, there are things that have to be condensed. Like, for example, there were more kids in the book. We have 2.
Okay.
So that means that and Tiffany had a storyline for each kid. So you know, we limited the storylines. So as a screenwriter, my role is to take this book, figure out a screen story, a movie, write it, and then as the director, I then take that script, that blueprint for the movie, and turn it into the visual story that we see and that we just experienced through the trailer.
And there's a very different way, like you said, there are people who ingest books differently than you ingest a visual medium. You hear people always talk about whether it be the Marvel universe, it's not just like the comics and you know, this book, I like the book better. I like color purple in the book better than I did the movie and all that type of stuff. I get all of that. But there's a process. I'm one who enjoys the visual medium more than reading the books. And so tell us about that concept, because as you mentioned, it was more kids in the book. It probably wouldn't have been as interesting. That's kind of like the magic number, 2 kids. You know, when you look at any type of movie or a TV show, that's kind of a magic number. But talk to us about that.
Sure, and even you know from the network was they that was the network decision, and it was the right one, and it was a production concern. It wasn't even a creative concern. When you have minors on set, they have to go to school. So you have an on-set educator, so you have to schedule around their availability. So it was challenging enough to schedule around all this, you know, all the different scenes we have to shoot with 2 kids. Imagine if it was 4. So it's not even always creative decisions that inspire these changes. And to your point, so there's two different art forms. I call a novel a complete art form, and what I mean by that is the author writes the book, the reader reads it, and that's the end of the creative relationship beyond memories and thinking about it and talking about it, etc. Whereas a screenplay is an incomplete art form, because as the screenwriter, when I write the script, it's not finished. It's again, it's a blueprint for a movie, which is the completed art form. So you watch the movie, that's the end of the creative relationship between you and the creator, again, beyond memories, and we hope you talk about it and that kind of a thing. So and also you're communicating differently. Another point you made. So in a book, you're creating imagery through what? Words. In a film, you're creating imagery through images.
Yeah.
So necessarily, here's an exercise that I do, because I teach directing and screenwriting at the University of Georgia. But an exercise that I do very early on is on the PowerPoint, I have the word chair, and it's just a white, you know, PowerPoint with white with black letters spelling out CHIR. And I have them look at that. Then my next slide is a picture of an actual chair. And it's enlightening for them, because it's like, oh, you know, this is a screenwriting class. That's how I was, you know, when opening PowerPoint for screenwriting class, it's like, we've been writing prose, like you and I, most Americans, most people, you've been writing prose since the beginning of your writing career. But screenwriting, it's a visual medium. If you can't see it or hear it, you can't write it. You're describing action on the scene. So there's no interior monologues. You know, you show, you don't tell. So it's a completely different way of not only imagining, but then also communicating as well.
No, that's amazing. Actually, I was going there next, because everything you talked about in this interview, it feels like I'm in a class, which is great, because we want our audience to be able to receive it in that way. Tell us about teaching at UGA and so balancing out this as a creative, sometimes creatives get that point. Man, I just want to be the next Tyler Perry. I just want to write and everything, but you got to pay some bills. And
That's right.
so, you've got this. You tell us about the balance between
Sure.
staying out there in the industry and trying to stay active, but then also taking this career of shaping the next minds in the space.
Sure. It's a great question. And, the University of Georgia is a Research One university, and Research One universities are universities that actually conduct research. So they're getting millions of dollars of grants every year from the government and from industry and organizations to do what? To advance society through research.
Mm-hmm.
I'm not a research professor. I'm a filmmaker. I'm a creative professor. So
Mm-hmm.
I'm a creative professor at a Research One university. What does that mean? Well, it means that Research One universities, which are at the top as far as universities go,
Mm-hmm.
not so much the school as much as the distinction is what I mean.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
They hire you to teach what you actually do. So you can't even, you're not going to get hired at a Research One university unless you have a track record of educating, but also a track record of actually performing and excelling in your field of study.
Got it.
So the expectation at a Research One is that you are not only teaching, but you're also doing. So you get tenure not from teaching, it's from doing and from the awards you get for what you actually do. Because again, you're advancing society by what? Creating, in my case, doing research, developing new ways of thinking, solving problems, etc. So with that being said, at a Research One, your workload is you teach fewer classes. So for example, when I was at Hampton University, where I was before I came to the University of Georgia, I was on what you call a 4-4, meaning I taught 4 classes per semester, right? But Hampton is not a Research One. Howard, it may soon be the first HBCU that's a Research One, and that'll be exciting. But you have at UGA, I'm on a 2-2, so I teach 2 classes per semester. But it's not like the rest of my time I'm out just kicking back or relaxing. No, I'm out in the marketplace working and doing and creating because I'm a filmmaker whether I'm teaching or not.
Right.
I'm an author whether I'm teaching or not. I'm going to create. It's nice to be able to do both, but it's an expectation. It's not a battle when you're at a Research One university, as opposed to say like a teaching institution. They hire you to teach, and the whole idea of research, creative works is not even really a part of how they calculate your work and service to the university.
Talk to us a little bit before we bounce. Talk to us a little bit about for creatives, it's not a 9-to-5 job. It's not a 40-hour-a-week job. It's not how have you managed your career to make sure, in between movies, are you writing scripts? Are you writing, you may be doing commercials? What kind of work for a young person who says, man, I can't figure this thing out? Kind of give them a little bit of some insight on the type of work that can keep them busy in between making the film projects that they really want to make.
Precisely, that's a great question. And for me, I'm a hired gun. I'm hired to write screenplays. I'm hired to direct, and these aren't stories that for example, this The Sound of Christmas. That's from Tiffany L. Warren's novel. I didn't come up with this world, this universe, this story, right? So even in the midst of that, like my next project is that I'm currently working on, that I'm writing. It's a Tubi original movie. It's a psychological thriller with Mar Vista Entertainment. Again, it's an idea that Mar Vista came up with that I'm developing and writing and will direct. But I have 2 novels myself that I published that I'm trying to get made, which those are my stories. So even whenever I'm actually working and getting a check, right, to write and direct, I still have the desire to do what? Tell my own story. So
That's right.
I'll tell you my advice for the young people is to actually do. This phone right here, this 4K camera I have on this phone, produces prettier pictures than the 16mm film that we shot with at NYU Film School. So there's literally no reason not to create. I mean, this question is great to have now because there's no excuse. You
Right.
can shoot a movie and edit a movie literally on your phone.
You can.
So there's no excuse. And so you should be creating because you love it and you can't do anything but create. Like we were talking before we went live on air.
Yeah.
We just create. It has nothing to do with, oh, this is Miguel's show, or oh, he's in the Black Chamber. It has nothing to do with that.
Right.
And that's part of it, sure, because
Right.
you do have to, use your gifts, monetize your gifts, etc. But
Right.
we're going to create regardless. So if a young
Exactly.
person is saying, what do I have to do? And they're not doing anything, I'm like, wow, you lack the imagination that you need to be successful, no matter what area you choose to go in, because how imaginative is it that you're shooting inane videos, probably talking about your outfit or your food, but it didn't occur to you to shoot a narrative film on the same thing?
Correct. And I think that's the balance between this microwave society that we're in right now, where there's such instant gratification. My once again I talked about my 9-year-old earlier, and I played her a song from the 80s or 90s, 70s probably. Back in the 70s they had that first minute and a half, 2 minutes where it was a narrative when and they were talking, and she looked
Girl,
on the
what's your sign?
yeah, girl, and she looked on the car on the Apple Play in the car. She said, "Daddy, is that song 8 minutes long?"
That's 3 songs right now. The
That's
programming
3
director be like,
songs,
no,
right?
we're not wasting 8 minutes for no one song.
For once. And so my point in bringing that up is, you're right. There are tools that are at our disposal, that we as Gen Xers, there's a process that we want to go through, and it's kind of a balance, because it's hard to tell these young people that it's not working when it gets them 1 million followers.
Right. Right.
And so we
Right.
got to find a balance in saying, okay, I get why you're doing this. They're making a lot of forgettable content, but they're not in the business of making content that's going to really last. They're in the business of getting eyeballs and attention. So being able to learn how to balance that, I'm just interested to see how we'll continue to evolve as creators in that space. So all right, so you talked about the film, you talked about the work you got going on. In 5 years, where do you see yourself being in this space? You sit in the city of Atlanta. There's a lot of work to get done out here.
I'll say this: in 5 years, this is my wife and myself. We have 4 kids. This is our last move. My kids have lived in 4 different states, and I'm not military, so
Yeah.
this is it for us. So in 5 years, it's creating more content with bigger budgets, because it's like you want more toys. You want a broader palette of from which to paint your masterpieces. So
Yeah.
creating more content, creating my own content. And again, if it's the right project, I'll always be a hired gun to write and direct.
Sure,
If it's the right, 'cause
sure.
The Sound of Christmas is my aesthetic.
Shoot, Tyler Perry's still a hired gun in certain aspects. So if he's still doing it, you're not too good for it. None of us
Yeah,
are too good
because
for it.
even when he shoots his stuff, he has his deal with Amazon. He don't have, Amazon execs still saying, hey, you need to make this edit, this change, and he still has to get that, use their distribution. But yeah, more and
Absolutely.
bigger content, bigger tools, more important stories, and telling my own stories is really what I see in the next 5 years.
All right, man. So tell us about working with. You had some pretty all-star cast. You had Neo and Soraya and Dre Michelle. Tell us about working with those A-list celebrities.
It was great. So it was great working with Neo. He before the shoot, we had a brief conversation because I hadn't met him before.
Okay.
And the fact he's this international pop star who actually has a ton of acting experience. He's been in a ton of stuff,
He
and
has.
in lots of things. The fact that he was willing, interested, and able to forsake the international pop star persona and become Quentin in the movie was great. So we got on great. He was open, and I think we did great. Soraya, she is just a powerfully talented and really a pleasant person as well. I mean, she can sing, she can act, and just a cool person. It was great to work with her. When you have actors who are talented, and this being a musical with both of them being able to sing, it's almost like, wow.
Soraya, for people who don't remember, she was a young lady who was on Empire, the show that was pretty popular a few years back.
Yeah, and she's currently in Kingdom Business on BET Plus, and Black Mafia family as well. She's blowing up too. And then Drea Michelle, she plays the antagonist Chloe in the film. It's one of those performances where she plays it so well that people actually don't like her in real life because they think that's her. Seriously, like we had the premiere screening red carpet at Regal Atlantic Station. What was that? 2 weeks ago.
Yeah.
And after the screening, because people were talking to the screen and everything, she said, I might need some therapy after this. But she played that role.
Yeah.
She played it so well. And I will tell you all, Dre is a sweet person. She's not Chloe. It was a role. So, don't say, Chloe, I can't stand you when you see her on the street.
Oh God, don't run up on her on the street and want to sit up here and fight her over a role that she played.
So, and as any good Christmas movie, the music is everything. And
yes, it is.
We have 3 Grammy winners contributing to the music. We have, of course, Neo.
Yep.
And our composer, Teddy Bishop, has a statue, as well as Jonathan McReynolds, who did an original song, who also has a statue. And then platinum selling producer Little Ronnie did original music. And then Myron Butler, gospel producer extraordinaire. So the music is everything. The goal with any Christmas movie is that every year you're not just watching the movie, but singing the songs.
Absolutely.
And we have that. I think we have the formula, and hopefully you all will be singing them year after year.
Booker, man, I appreciate your time, brother. I appreciate you coming out and giving us this time. And I'm looking forward to checking out the film. Didn't get a chance to check it out before the show. I wanted to, just been super busy, but it's the perfect formula. The sappy formula is ready to go, you know, and so we're going to enjoy every minute of it, man. Thank you for your time.
I appreciate it, and I'm looking forward to hearing your thoughts after you check it out.
Absolutely.